Today we've got a scene from California, and
Yeah, so
it's
you're doing a landscape today.
yeah. So I guess we haven't done a landscape together, or at least um, we've done some. Um, I guess we've done a little bit of like park space, um, but
Hmm.
this is probably
Yeah.
like the largest vista we're tackling. This is a road that
Mm.
goes east from East Bay, like Walnut Creek area,
Hmm.
to
Okay.
kind of like way out east towards Rio Vista, where my in-laws live. So we always take a lot of pictures when we're on this road going out that way. It's really picturesque, and then eventually past this area, you get to a lot of the windmills or the wind turbines, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
just really
Hmm.
really beautiful. So we always appreciate that drive. But yeah, so
Nice.
there's a I love these, like there's certain rolling hills, and at certain times of the day that are just really beautiful. Um, and there's just colors here that obviously the picture, I don't think the picture does it justice, but when we're driving,
Yeah.
you can see these really bright, like oranges and yellows and some purples in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Those
blue.
grassy hills.
Yeah, and then blues in the background. So yeah, it's just a beautiful scene. So I'm gonna go right into it, and um, you know, large. These are pretty simple structures overall. Like it's not as um, like what's the word? Um, we have really a high contrast scene, right? We have the hills that are in front of the really bright sky. So there are some things that are more straightforward about this particular landscape. No clouds that we have to worry about. But then the I think the areas that are in the foreground, maybe in the middle ground, um, probably are the more challenging aspects. We have the cars, we have
Hmm.
the values. Everything's kind of pretty much in shadow. So
How do you decide where to start making your marks?
well, I mean, the most obvious ones for me are like the hills, right? Like so the the
Okay.
the and I'm going to actually start in the middle here. What I want, because my paper size, it's not exactly proportional to the image. It might be pretty close, but I definitely want to make sure I start like what I want to focus on is that hill, that that high point of that hill in the center, and I want to make sure I get that. So it's probably smarter for me to actually just uh, start capturing that, start sketching that, and then as I make my way out left and right, it's okay if certain things get cut off because I've maintained the focal point where I want it to be. So um, yeah, I'm just kind of just measuring the angle.
Angle of the hill.
Yeah, so that's a pretty obvious place to start in terms of the most obvious lines, right? And then we have the angles of the highway. Where do I want the highway to end? And in the picture, it's kind of basically around here. Yeah. and it's going like this. Yeah, I have my screen in front of me. That's why I'm going over past my paper. Um, so I'm going to make a line like this. And it goes up like that. And then this line, and then it goes down like this. That's kind of pretty much like the white lines. And then I'm going to extend this out. So everything
You
obviously.
know, when you think of the road, I don't think of road as being that wide, and I think of hills and skies as being really spacious. But in this photo, the road, takes up the whole bottom part. So I have to overcome my sense of what a road is, you know,
Oh, you mean like because you
get the
instinctively think
proportions
it's
right. Yeah.
you instinctively think it's a small like line in the distance or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like roads are narrow basically.
Oh, right, right.
But
Yeah, I
in this
mean,
in this case, it's not.
obviously because we're in a car driving, like the road is going to be like the major part of the perspective, unless we were pointing the camera, to the left or the right out the windows, right? Um, but yeah, I think as a visual person, the view out the front window is usually more interesting to me. But maybe that's just because we're used to that as a driver. I don't know. Um, yeah, so these are the rough contours, the outline of everything that's in there. And then the car. So actually, I think so. The car, I'm just going to start with like putting a blob down. Oh, I should get the top of the barrier there. So I'm putting the very rough shape of the car. So I'll come back to that. Um, and then, I actually do really like um, including cars in these types of scenes.
What are you measuring for now?
The angle from like this car to the car in front of it. Um, if
Okay.
you get these proportions right, then it just helps a lot with um, conveying a sense of scale and depth. Um, and it can be a little tricky because we often have to get past our conceptions of what cars are. Um, it's like painting the sun. Um, the sun doesn't look like what it usually looks like when we draw a sun in a tree. Um, so I'm gonna make these a little bit more refined because they're pretty close up, and I want the things that are close to us I want to have more detail. I want to be more intentional about them. And, cars kind of lend themselves to that. They're kind of like faces. If you get certain things wrong or out of whack on a car, it's really noticeable. So, but much of, it's really just the car that's closest to us that I really have to worry about. And then, yeah, there's actually not, thankfully, there's not a ton of like structures, things going on. But some things are helpful to get accurately, like these, I'm not sure what they are, but these,
Oak trees.
huh?
But which part are you not
Yeah,
sure what they are?
there are these like sticks or poles that stick up behind the railing. Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So like,
Probably just reflective.
yeah. So like with these things, if you get the angles right, it just helps with conveying the perspective. Yeah, I'm noticing that I have the kind of have like double lines here. Um, and I'm going to make this, make the white lines angle this way more. And, notice the lines on the road, they're not, we think they're white, but they're actually not, um, in terms of the relative values in the scene. So what I like about the scene is I like the contrast, right? I like how everything in the foreground and the middle ground are pretty dark, right? Compared to uh, the brightest parts on the hills and then the sky, of course. So I do want to make sure that whatever we do in the end, our eyes are drawn to those hills, and the contrasting light and dark there. So I'm just kind of thinking ahead
Mm-hmm.
how I want to convey that. And then how can I make sure that all of these other aspects in the middle ground and foreground are um, not too bright. They don't end up too bright and distracting us from the focal point, which is more in the background. Um, so there are colors that we have like the yellow ochres. We have uh, the brightest parts of the hills um, are they kind of approach like orangish. Um, and there's purples there I see. And actually the hill in the distance, there's a sliver of the hill on the right side, like around here, that actually is pretty bright. It's almost, I think it's like brighter than,
Yeah, it's another hill. It's a different hill with different light.
yeah. So I'm gonna make sure I try to remember that one as being actually, it's a more pure, brighter tone. Um, yeah. So I'm gonna start playing around with some of the colors. I'm gonna test them out on the paper here. Um, and just like kind of starting with the pure colors themselves without mixing anything, we're gonna just kind of as a reference see how far off we are, right? So this I'm looking at, does it match the that that hill, the bright hill on the right side in the distance, all the way back? Um, it's a little too warm, I would say. So because it's kind of tricky, right? Because things further away, things further away should be a little bit more neutral. So in one sense, it's cooler than the brightest parts of the two hills in front. We can try this lemon yellow and see what the difference is there. So that is like a cooler yellow, but I think it's too yellow still. Although it potentially could work. And remember, we don't have to be like a slave to the actual, what we think the colors are on the screen. We can work with our own combination of colors. If they work together, it can still be a pretty convincing picture. So this yellow, what we know the complementary of yellow is what?
Green.
It's violet or purple, right? So on
purple?
this,
Okay.
on this,
I guess I don't know.
yeah. So yellow on the color wheel, go across from that is basically purple.
I should get one of those.
Yeah, color wheel. So anything here is going to go with it's going to go with this as a complementary. Yeah. So I'm going to make a choice here, which is use that lemon yellow. Maybe I'll try toning it down with the yellow ochre and see what happens. Yeah, I kind of like that, actually. And then the opposite of yellow, the complementary of yellow is on the violet end. So I'm going to try this quinacridone rose. Use a
Yeah, I don't really have a violet in my color blank. Just I could use red, huh? Or blue.
Yeah, so you got to add a blue and a red together to get a violet.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make an executive decision and use those combinations to represent the I'm gonna use this purple to do the shadow of the hills, and then for the front, the two warmer hills in the front, in the middle ground, I'm gonna try. This is a gamboge, new gamboge. It's this kind of orangish yellow. I'm going to try adding a little bit of this Purell orange to it. Maybe that's too. I mean, I guess it's not too far off. Yeah, I might do that actually. I might use the new gamboge as a base for the two warmer, brighter hills, and then add a little bit of that Purell orange to it. So I think that's actually pretty close. And then I'll use the purplish to do the shadows. All right, so I'm gonna put down some water here. Keeping in mind where like the light meets the dark. There are some artists out there that do these Western type of sceneries really, really well. And I wish I could be like that. But this is a good exercise.
Yeah, I've seen some of that really, really good art. One of the guys that grew up with that here, his dad has a wing at the Tucson Museum of Art that's just Western art,
Oh,
and
really?
his house is like that. You know, I mean, yeah, it's like pretty incredible. So you're doing the hills right now, right?
Yeah.
And you got that color from yellow and purple.
No, this is a I'm taking a, it's called New Gamboge, which is like, it's kind of an orangish look up here. But when you put it down, it actually has a
Okay.
kind of a yellowish tint to it. And then what I'm going to do is add pearl orange to it while it's wet. This is just experimenting here because yeah, it's not going to be exactly like. And then I'm going to try to go ahead and do the purplish. Funny, I'm not even using a mixing dish right now, but I'm going to start one. Start here. 1 second. I was just mixing on the paper, on my scrap paper, which is totally fine, but um,
So what's the gap in between right now? Is
that's going to be so.
the shadow
Yeah,
or
that's going to be the shadow.
and for the gray, what are you using for the shadow?
It's a red. It's basically a red and a blue combination. It's the reds. It's the
Okay.
quinacridone rose and an indanthrone blue.
Good.
interesting because you're I know that the grass on the right, or not the grass, but the hills that are just to the right of that hill, um, it's lighter, and it's going to be a challenge to kind of distinguish between that and the dark part that I've just put down. Um, so I'm trying to think about that, what I want to do. And I'm really just like I'm mixing in these colors all together, not really worrying too much about everything blending and um, so I'm going to think about what we need to do for the overall like grassy areas um, of the hills throughout. Um, I want to get that base layer down before I start putting down like the trees and the darker greens. Um, so we know we want to be on the cooler side because it's all in shadow. And so obviously I'm going to go to my trusty Perylene green, see where that gets us. Um, and we have some much more saturated, darker, cool greens. I'm gonna use that to put down the really heavy like tree line. Trying to stay clear of these pegs or whatever they are as best I can. It's not perfect, but so you see how I'm just kind of in one long stroke, I'm just kind of weaving in and out. And that way you keep the water flowing in between spaces. Before I forget, I'm going to do the lemon yellow in the background. That background that bright hill in the back. And I'm going to add a little bit of the yellow ochre because I remember testing that out on the paper and it seemed to dull it down a little bit. And then yeah, so there's a lot of subtleties here that um, I'm going to go back in and kind of touch up some certain things when I get when everything is laid out a little bit better. Kind of using the tip of this brush because it has kind of a unique point at the end to get these the trees that are at the top. There's more of a warmer green um, that I'm gonna put into this cool green. So it's not really warm, and I'm gonna try to get this tree that's over here. You can tell that it's a slightly different tint um, from the other greens. Make this area darker because it's in the back. Or, I mean, it's just a different. It's more in the dark, I think. Kind of differentiating it from the grass, the blades of grass that are in front. Give it some volume. I'm going to make this area slightly greener. Trying to get some browns. See if I can. I'm just kind of trying to blend these areas a little bit better. Definitely a lot trickier than it looks, I feel like, to capture this.
Yeah, it's subtle, which is hard to do. Subtle but vibrant.
All right, I'm going to try to tackle the roadway and the cars. And I think the best way is to lay down a wash of gray. My water is a little dirty, so there's a green tint to it, but I think it's okay. I'm wetting all this, including the car and the concrete barrier. I'm going to do this side as well. I'm going to try to leave the railing untouched because there's some areas that I can, if I leave white brighter, it'll be reflective like it is in the picture. And then I'm going to use my, there's a little bit of actually a blue tint there. And I'm wondering if the cerulean blue, yeah, I think the cerulean blue will be good for that. Yeah, because that actually, I'm going to use this for the sky too. So it's interesting, like the reflections, the reflective areas of the asphalt, actually are pretty blue. And then these middle areas, like you see the black, the darker areas coming towards us, getting bigger. There's a line like that. And I'm doing this when it's still wet because it'll have a nice diffusing um, result.
You're using Payne's Gray for that?
Yeah, darker um, areas in the trees. Another example of getting the negative spaces around these whatever those are called, I forget, to like make them stand out. So if you get the dark areas around them.
Oh, right.
All right, I'm going to be speeding through to get to work on the cars here. We already have kind of like a bluish tint to that car. I think what will really help is once we start putting down this, the back window. Too wet, too wet. The wheel wells are important because they really lend the shape and communicate that it's a car. And they'll always be a little higher in the back. Higher in the sense of because it's receding, going away from us.
Closer.
Yeah. And then there's always a shadow underneath. And there's shade these areas up here a little bit more. I'm adding a little bit of the blue. Just trying to be careful, like to leave some areas that can be like in highlight. And I'm gonna lay down a brighter, like this pearl orange, because when it's like a bright red light, but it actually you get that across better when it to me when it's closer to orange, and then put in um, some darker, like a reddish, actual red into it once that dries. More convincing to me because it's,
Mhm.
you know, it'll look more orange when it's in that light.
Yeah, and it lets you differentiate between the actual red lights and the strip in between.
Yeah.
Do you care, Francis, if people see the photograph that you painted from, or it doesn't really matter? That's just your reference. And
I mean, since I've been doing these recordings, I've just kind of let go of any concern about that. Um, Generally,
okay,
when it's like, my like fuller paintings that are not for like these demos, I generally won't show that picture. But I think for this purposes, it's good to for people to be able to see it, and
hmm
it's also helping me to like just be like I've become okay if like I'm comfortable, more comfortable now if people don't think it was a great resemblance. Um, I don't worry about that
hmm
anymore.
So it's more that the photograph is just a reference. It's just a starting point.
Yeah, problem with using the same brush the entire painting. Um, it's a good and bad thing. Cars can be fun and also really kind of tricky to capture. hard to narrate this one because I feel like there's so many different things to tackle. Um, like I kind of have to jump around.
Hmm.
Not the best brush for that, but
Is it the same brush you've used the whole time?
no, I just want to switch to this smaller one to get some of these
Oh,
finer
yeah,
points.
that's what I thought. So
Yeah,
you're using a 10 and now you're like a 6 or 4?
this is a 6. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you from California too, Francis?
I was born there. Yeah. All right. One last thing I want to do is deal with the sky. This is a 20.
Mm,
Kind of carefully going up to the edge of the hills. Probably should have done this first
mm,
so that I could get some of the elements sitting on top of the sky, on a layer on top of the sky when the sky is dried. But it is what it is.
mm.
This blue is a little hard to mix into a puddle, I've noticed.
Which blue is it?
Cerulean blue.
Okay.
There actually are some greens in there.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a smog layer or forest fire,
Hmm.
some kind of a plume of some kind.
Yeah, I should have done the sky first. If I had, you know, a lot more time to make this painting, I would have turned it upside down, made the sky kind of pretty, like, well, I wouldn't have to turn it upside down necessarily, but I would have turned if I could freely turn it for this demo, I would have turned it around so that I can avoid the water dripping down.
Mm-hmm.
I need to make the road,
Yeah, when you get down to the edge.
yeah,
Yeah.
I need to make the road darker. It's too bright.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that made the sky look better immediately.
I'm gonna exaggerate the purples a little bit more here. Too bright back here too.
Yeah.
I think I actually would have liked this blue on top of more.
What's that blue?
It's the phthalo blue.
Halo, right? Okay.
I'll let that dry. I think I'm at a stopping point. Um, yeah.
Nicely done, Francis.
Uh, yeah, we can treat it as a study. It's like where you try to figure out how you would approach different areas and
Hmm.
like kind of if I were to do this again, I definitely have ideas about um, what I would do differently. Probably starting with like the
Yeah,
the
of course.
order of how I started it. Um, um, some of the color choices. But overall, I think for a little bit over an hour, it's definitely a start.